Most people walk through life with an invisible enemy pressing down on their shoulders, one that whispers in their ear at every opportunity, feeding them lies, draining their will, clouding their self-worth. That voice, it's not some external force, it's the internal critic. It's the relentless, negative self-talk that chews away at confidence like rust on steel. And the tragedy is, we rarely stop to question it. We just accept it as truth. We let it tell us we're not good enough, not smart enough, not strong enough. We let it dominate our inner world unchecked like a tyrant ruling a kingdom of doubt. But here's the thing. Just because a thought arises in your mind doesn't mean it's true. The brain isn't a pure mirror of reality. It's a storyteller. And sometimes it tells awful stories. It can take a single mistake and inflate it into a judgment on your entire character. You forget to follow through on something small, and the voice says you're irresponsible. You stumble in a conversation, and the voice says you're socially awkward. You struggle to finish something important, and the voice whispers you'll never succeed. And what do? We agree, we nod silently and internalize it. We absorb it like a sponge takes water, and we carry it into the next moment, the next day, the next year. You can't build self-esteem on top of a foundation of self-contempt. You can't walk tall if you're dragging yourself through the dirt in your own mind. So the first step, before anything else, is to wake up to the war within. And instead of passively listening to that voice, start engaging with it. Observe it when the critic starts up. Don't just absorb its message. Push back. Ask yourself, is this really true? Where's the evidence? Most of the time, you'll find that what the voice is saying isn't a fact, it's an interpretation. And often it's based on fear, shame, or unresolved past experiences. If someone spoke to you the way your inner voice does, constantly cutting you down, you'd probably walk away from that person. So why tolerate it from yourself? You don't overcome negative self-talk by pretending it isn't there. You overcome it by confronting it with truth, clarity, and compassion. You start by becoming aware of it, catching it in real time, and naming it. Ah, there's that voice again, telling me I'm a failure just because I struggled today. And then you counter it. You bring logic to the emotional chaos. No, I had a hard day. That doesn't mean I'm a failure. It means I'm human. This practice, because that's what it is, a practice, is not about becoming delusional or ignoring your weaknesses. It's about being honest in a balanced way. Yes, you've made mistakes. Yes, you have flaws, but you also have strengths, progress, and potential. Self-esteem grows not by denying the negative, but by refusing to be defined by it. And the beauty of it is, once you begin this work, the internal landscape starts to shift. The same way a garden changes when you stop letting the weeds take over and begin planting seeds of something better. A kind word to yourself becomes a shelter in a storm. A fair assessment of your effort becomes a source of encouragement. You start to see that you're not broken, you're just growing, and that inner support changes how you show up to life. It changes how you walk into rooms, how you take on challenges, how you relate to people. And when that happens, the other pieces start falling into place. You begin setting small, achievable goals, not because you're trying to prove your worth, but because you believe you're capable. You stop comparing yourself to others, not because you've won, but because you've stopped needing validation to feel enough. You choose better company, not because you're desperate for approval, but because you respect yourself enough to protect your energy. You take care of yourself, not as an afterthought, but as a necessity. And you start facing fears not to conquer the world, but to reclaim your own. But it begins always with the voice in your head. Question it, challenge it, talk back to it, not once, but daily. Relentlessly, because your self-worth is not something fragile that needs to be earned. It's something powerful that needs to be remembered. And you are the only one who can do that remembering. That's where everything begins. So much of what paralyzes people is this looming idea that they have to leap from where they are now to some distant, perfected version of themselves in one grand, heroic motion. But life doesn't work that way. Change doesn't happen in a blaze of glory. It happens in inches, in small, consistent movements forward. And if you want to build your self-esteem, You have to stop trying to climb the whole mountain in a single bound and instead focus on placing one foot firmly in front of the other. Every single day, there's something profound that happens when you set a small, achievable goal and follow through on it. You send a message to yourself not just with words, but with action, that you can be relied on, that you're not just talk, that you're capable of movement even if it's slow. That alone begins to rewrite the story of your self-worth. And that story is everything, because most people don't lack potential. They lack belief, and that belief isn't just a feeling, it's a pattern. A result, it comes from evidence, from proof. You build it brick by brick, like a wall of trust in yourself. And each small win is one of those bricks. You don't have to be perfect. You don't need to get it all right. But you do need to begin. You need to pick one thing you can do today that's within reach and commit to doing it. Not because it will change the world, but because it will change how you see yourself. Maybe it's making your bed. Maybe it's showing up on time. Maybe it's putting your phone down for an hour and doing the thing you've been avoiding. The size of the goal doesn't matter. What matters is that you follow through, that you do what you say you're going to do. That's how you start to believe in yourself again, not through wishful thinking, but through proof. And it's not just about the achievement, it's about the direction. You might stumble, you might fall. You might even fail outright, but if you're aiming at something, even something small, you've got a reason to get back up. You've got a reason to realign. That aim gives structure to your days and meaning to your effort. And with each step, even if it's imperfect, you get stronger, more resilient, more grounded in the truth that you can move forward, no matter what life throws at you. But there's a trap here too. The trap is in setting goals that are too big, too abstract, or too distant. Goals that are rooted in fantasy instead of reality. Because then, failure isn't just likely. It's inevitable. And when that failure comes, it reinforces the voice in your head that says you're useless. You set yourself up to lose. So what do you do instead? You shrink the battlefield. You bring the goal closer. You say, today, I will finish this one thing. That's enough. And when you finish it, you own that win. You don't brush it off. You don't say it wasn't a big deal. No. You take it seriously because your brain is watching. Your soul is listening, and it needs those signals that you're not helpless, that you're building something, that you're stepping forward even if no one else sees it, and over time, something powerful starts to happen. The weight of failure doesn't hit you as hard. The fear of starting something new loses its grip. You begin to trust yourself, to handle what's in front of you, to face difficulty, to navigate complexity. That kind of trust can't be borrowed or bought. It's earned in the trenches, earned in the quiet, unglamorous moments when you keep your word to yourself. And here's the irony. When you do that, your goals actually grow, because now you're operating from a place of belief instead of doubt. You no longer see big challenges as threats, they become invitations. Not because they're easy, but because you know you've got the grit to take the first step. And that's all you ever need to take, just the next step. When people say they want confidence, what they often really mean is they want the feeling that they can rely on themselves. And that feeling doesn't come from dreaming. It comes from doing one step, one action, one promise kept. That's where it starts. One of the most destructive habits you can fall into, especially when you're trying to build a sense of self-worth, is comparison. It's subtle, it creeps in quietly, almost innocently. You scroll through your phone, and without even realizing it, you start measuring your life against carefully filtered snapshots of other people's highlight reels. You see someone who looks like they've got it all figured out. The career, the body, the relationship, the lifestyle. And suddenly, everything in your own life feels insufficient. It doesn't matter how far you've come or what battles you've overcome. One glance at someone else's success and your own self-worth begins to crumble under the weight of an illusion. But comparison is a lie. It's a trap disguised as insight. It masquerades as motivation, but in reality, it feeds insecurity and fuels resentment. Because what you're doing when you compare is robbing yourself of context. You're looking at someone's final chapter and holding it up against your rough draft. You're staring at the surface, blind to the struggle underneath. You don't know their pain. You don't know their compromises, their sacrifices, their late nights, their silent battles. You're comparing your behind the scenes footage to someone else's promotional trailer. It's never a fair fight. And what's worse, you become so focused on what others are doing, what they have, who they are. You lose sight of your own path entirely. Your goals get hijacked, your direction gets foggy. Instead of aiming at something meaningful to you, you start chasing shadows, trying to measure up to a standard that was never yours to begin with. And the more you do that, the more hollow your victories become, because they're not rooted in your values. They're not anchored in your purpose, they're borrowed dreams. This addiction to comparison breeds self-doubt. It undermines the foundation you're trying to build with every small goal you set and every negative thought you confront. It undoes progress by convincing you that your effort isn't enough unless it looks like someone else's success. But the truth is, the only real competition is between who you were yesterday and who you're becoming today. That's the only metric that matters. Are you moving forward? Are you being honest with yourself? Are you showing up with integrity, even when no one's watching? And here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people are going to be better than you at certain things. They're going to be more talented, more experienced, more accomplished. That's life, but that doesn't mean they're better than you. Your value as a person is not diminished by someone else's excellence. You can admire without envying. You can be inspired without feeling inadequate, but that requires strength. It requires clarity. You have to know who you are and, more importantly, who you're not trying to be. You're not here to replicate someone else's story. You're here to write your own, and your story is messy. It's complicated, it's unique, it has pain and failure and setbacks that no one sees, but it also has resilience, grit, and breakthroughs that can't be measured by likes or trophies. The real transformation happens not when you finally catch up to some imaginary standard, but when you realize you were never behind to begin with. You were just walking a different path, so when you feel that pull to compare, use it as a signal, a wake-up call. Not to push harder to compete, but to turn inward. Ask yourself, what am I chasing and why? Is it something that actually matters to you? Or is it something you've been conditioned to believe matters? Are you living your life, or are you performing a version of it to win approval from people who aren't even paying attention? The antidote to comparison isn't arrogance, it's authenticity, it's radical self-honesty. You have to be brave enough to say, this is what I care about, this is my goal, this is my struggle, this is enough. And then put your head down and do the work, not for applause, not for validation, but because it aligns with who you are. And slowly, piece by piece, you start building a sense of self that doesn't rise and fall with other people's achievements. You stop chasing and start becoming. The people you surround yourself with shape you in ways you don't even notice, until you step back and examine what's really going on. Because we're social creatures, we're wired to adapt, to fit in, to align ourselves with the norms of the group we're part of. And if the people around you are constantly tearing others down, if they're bitter, cynical, self-destructive, don't think for a second that you're immune to that influence. You might not see it happening in the moment, but slowly, quietly, your standards start to drop. Your mindset starts to shift. You begin accepting behaviors you would have once rejected. And eventually, you start questioning your own worth. Not because something changed inside you, but because you're living in an environment that refuses to recognize it. Now, this doesn't mean you cut people off the moment they struggle. That's not the point. Everyone's flawed. Everyone's hurting, but there's a difference between someone who's in pain and wants to grow, and someone who's content to stay in the mud and pull everyone else down with them. If you're constantly surrounded by people who mock your goals, laugh at your ambition, roll their eyes when you try to improve, then you have to ask yourself a hard question. Why am I staying here? Is it loyalty? Is it guilt? Or is it fear? Because none of those reasons are good enough to justify sabotaging your own growth. And here's the trap. Low self-esteem attracts the wrong kind of company. When you don't value yourself, you tolerate things you shouldn't. You let people disrespect you, use you, dismiss you because some part of you believes that's all you're worth. But stay you're in that dynamicc, carry thunder. The deeper that belief gets rooted, it becomes a cycle. You feel worthless, so you surround yourself with people who confirm that belief. And their behavior becomes further evidence that you were right all along. Breaking that cycle requires strength, it requires clarity, and it requires courage. Because sometimes, the moment you start to grow, the people around you feel threatened. They don't like it when you aim higher, when you raise your standards, when you start saying no to things you used to accept. It exposes something in them. It reminds them of their own stagnation. And they'll try to pull you back, not always out of malice, sometimes just out of fear. Fear of being left behind, fear that your progress will highlight their lack of it. But you can't let that fear dictate your life. You have to start choosing people who reflect the values you want to embody. People who inspire you, who hold you accountable, who challenge you to be better, not in a harsh, judgmental way, but in a way that says, I see your potential and I won't let you waste it. You need people who can celebrate your wins without resentment. People who can sit with you in your pain without trying to diminish it or make it about themselves. That kind of support system doesn't just help you grow. It becomes a mirror, a reminder of who you're capable of becoming. And you won't always find that in the people you've known the longest. Sometimes the most important relationships in your life won't be the ones that go back the furthest, but the ones that push you the highest. That's a hard truth, but it's one you have to accept if you're serious about building your self-esteem. Because if your environment is constantly draining you, no amount of positive self-talk or goal setting is going to be enough. You're trying to grow flowers in toxic soil, and the soil matters. This doesn't mean you become selfish. It doesn't mean you walk away from everyone the moment things get difficult, but it does mean you become discerning. You start asking, is this person adding to my life or subtracting from it? And when the answer becomes clear, you act. Maybe that means creating boundaries. Maybe that means reducing contact. Maybe it means walking away entirely. Whatever it takes to protect the space you need to heal, grow, and build a better version of yourself. And once you've cleared that space, fill it with the right voices. Seek out people who live with intention. People who are striving, not perfect, but striving. People who know how to listen, how to challenge, how to support. And most importantly, people who make you feel more like yourself, not less. Because who you are becoming depends, in part, on who you allow into your world. There's something profoundly telling about how a person treats themselves when no one else is watching. Not just in the grand gestures or the big decisions, but in the quiet, ordinary rituals of daily life. The food you choose to eat, the way you speak to yourself in the mirror, the amount of sleep you allow yourself to have, the way you move your body or neglect it. All of these small choices, repeated over time, form a pattern. And that pattern speaks. It tells you and the world exactly what you think you're worth. You cannot build genuine self-esteem if you treat yourself like an afterthought. You can't cultivate real inner strength while abandoning the vessel that carries you through life, your mind, your body, your emotional landscape. When you neglect your health, when you burn yourself out and ignore your needs, you're sending a message to yourself that you are not a priority. And whether you admit it or not, you internalize that message, you feel it, you live it. Self-care is not indulgence. It's not vanity, it's not weakness. It is the foundation of strength. You don't give your car the right fuel because you want to pamper it. You do it because the engine won't run without it. And in the same way, your mind won't think clearly, your spirit won't endure stress, and your confidence won't grow if your body is breaking down or starved of the basic things it needs to function. Well, but here's the trick: self-care isn't just about physical maintenance. It's about how you treat yourself emotionally and psychologically too. It's in the way you allow rest without guilt, the way you give yourself time to breathe, space to think, permission to feel. It's in the way you carve out time for silence instead of letting your thoughts get drowned in constant noise. It's in saying, I matter enough to protect my peace. That's not selfish, that's survival, that's structure. That's sanity, And you'll notice something once you begin to take yourself seriously. Once you begin to respect your own needs, not in some abstract, philosophical sense, but in a real, consistent, practical way, you start to feel more solid, more rooted, more alive. It's subtle at first. A bit more energy in the morning, a bit less anxiety through the day, a bit more confidence in how you move through the world. Not because everything outside of you has changed, but because something inside you has realigned. And there's a reason why this is connected so deeply to self-esteem. Because when you care for yourself, when you tend to your own well-being, you are literally proving to yourself that you have value. Not because someone else said so, not because the world rewarded you, but because you treated yourself like someone who is worth taking care of. That's where esteem comes from. You esteem what you consistently care for, but most people wait. They wait until they're burnt out, broken down, falling apart. Then they react. Then they rush to fix everything. But the mindset has to flip. You don't take care of yourself because you're falling apart. You take care of yourself to stay strong, to stay clear, to stay capable of facing the demands of life. You don't wait until your house is on fire to check the wiring. You make it a routine. You make it a discipline. And that's what this is, discipline, not a spa day, not a temporary escape. Discipline in how you sleep, how you eat, how you manage stress. Discipline in what you consume, not just with your mouth, but with your mind. The media you absorb, the conversations you entertain, the internal dialogues you permit. All of it matters, because all of it feeds into your belief about who you are. If you speak to yourself with contempt, neglect your body, ignore your needs, and let chaos dominate your environment, don't be surprised if you feel small, tired, lost. It's not just a mood, it's a result, a consequence of long-standing patterns, and the only way out is to choose deliberately to act like someone who deserves more. Not feel like it, act like it. The feeling will follow the behavior, not the other way around, so you start where you are. Not with the perfect plan, not with grand declarations, but with one small commitment to yourself that you keep. You show your body it matters. You show your mind it deserves rest. You show your soul it's still being listened to. And from there, something shifts slowly, quietly, powerfully. That's where the rebuild begins. There's a fundamental truth about self-esteem that most people overlook. It isn't built in theory. It's not something you read your way into or talk yourself into believing. It's earned through action. Real, deliberate action taken in the face of fear, hesitation, discomfort. If you wait until you feel confident to act, you'll wait forever. The feeling doesn't come first. The action does. You have to do the thing while you're still afraid. That's how the process works. That's how you grow. That's how you earn self-respect, by proving to yourself, over and over again, that you're capable of facing the things that scare you and doing them anyway. And most of what you're afraid of isn't even dangerous. It's just unknown, it's unfamiliar, it's uncomfortable. Maybe it's the fear of failure, maybe it's the fear of rejection, maybe it's the fear of looking foolish or being misunderstood. But underneath it all, it's the same root, the fear that you're not enough to handle what life throws at you. And so you shrink, you play small, you avoid risk, avoid exposure, avoid movement. And every time you do that, every time you let the fear win, you send a quiet message to yourself that says, I'm not strong enough. I can't handle this. That message becomes a belief, and that belief shapes your identity. That's how self-doubt grows. Not because it's true, but because you reinforce it through avoidance. But it works the other way too. Every time you face a fear, even in the smallest way, you send a different message. I showed up. I didn't run. I didn't quit. That becomes your new evidence. That becomes your new identity. And that's where self-esteem begins to shift from something weak and wavering to something solid, earned, deserved. Not because you were fearless, but because you were courageous enough to act anyway. Courage in this sense isn't dramatic. It's not about slaying dragons or climbing mountains. It's in the everyday acts, speaking up when you'd rather stay silent, taking responsibility instead of making excuses, reaching out instead of isolating, trying again after a setback. The world won't applaud these moments, but your soul will. You'll feel it. You'll walk differently. You'll speak more clearly. You'll begin to trust yourself in a deeper way. Not because you're perfect, but because you've been tested and you didn't retreat. And that's what people are really searching for when they say they want confidence. They don't want blind bravado. They want to feel like they can rely on themselves, that no matter what happens, they'll find a way through. But that doesn't come from standing still. That belief is forged in the fire of experience. It's not built by watching from the sidelines. You've got to get in the game. You've got to try things. You've got to fall, get bruised, embarrassed even, and then get up and try again. And that's not something anyone else can give you. People can encourage you, support you, inspire you, but they can't do it for you. They can't face your fears. They can't take the risks that only you can take. That's your work. And every time you choose to act, despite the fear, despite the doubt, despite the discomfort, you get a little stronger. You gather more evidence that you are someone who does hard things, someone who doesn't back down, someone who follows through. And once you start to see yourself that way, your life begins to change. You stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You begin to build a foundation of pride that's rooted in reality. And people feel that, they notice, but more importantly, you notice, you feel aligned, you feel clear. You feel solid because now you're not just thinking differently. You're living differently. You don't need to do everything at once. You don't need to conquer the biggest fear on the list. Just take one step. Start with one thing you've been avoiding. Do it today, not because you feel like it, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because the version of you that you're trying to become, the stronger, more grounded, more capable version, is waiting on the other side of that action. That's where the real change begins.